This is the lecture for Chapter 12, covering middle childhood still in terms of cognitive development. What will you learn in this chapter? Does cognition improve naturally with age, or is teaching crucial to its development? Why do children use slang, curse words, and bad grammar? What type of school is best during middle childhood? Building on theory, in terms of Piaget, we're talking about concrete operational thought. This is the ability to reason logically about direct experiences and perceptions. Horizontal décollage is when certain concepts appear in sequence over time at each level. The school-age child, no longer limited by egocentrism, performs logical operations. Children apply their new reasoning skills to concrete situations. What develops during middle childhood is the ability to use mental categories and subcategories flexibly, inductively, and simultaneously. The official dictionary used for the Scripps National Spelling Bee has 472,000 words, which makes rote memorization impossible. Instead, winners recognize patterns, roots, and exceptions, all possible in middle childhood. In terms of hierarchy of categories, there's classification, and this involves organization of things into groups or categories or classes according to some common characteristic. By age 8, most children can classify. Seriation includes knowledge that things can be arranged in logical series. Switching over to Vygotsky and culture, there's the role of instruction. Education occurs everywhere, and knowledge is acquired from social context. Guiding each child through the zone of proximal development is crucial. Children are apprentices in learning, and language is integral as a mediator for understanding and learning. Continuing with Vygotsky and culture, cultural variations. Cultural and context affect a wide variety of learning. Culture also affects how children learn, not just what they learn. For example, Varanasi children and spatial orientation. Their culture uses direction to denote things. For example, it is to the west rather than it is near the square. In the picture here, and these are the Varanasi children. They sleep beside the Ganges River in the daytime, and they use their excellent sense of direction to guide devotees from elsewhere. All right, now we're going to talk about information processing. This is a theory, and it compares the human thinking process by analogy to a computer analysis of data. Like computers, people sense and perceive large amounts of information. It seeks specific units of information, as a search engine does. It analyzes, as software programs do, and expresses their conclusions so another person can understand, as a network computer or a printout might do. There is evidence of the theory's usefulness. Gradual brain growth is seen in neurological scans. Central processing hubs built over time with practice and learning. This is also called automaticity. There's also Siegler's math research findings. There's gradual accrual of math understandings and cultural influences of practice specifics. All right, getting more into this in terms of memory. Sensory memory, or the sensory register, is the component of the information processing system in which incoming stimulus information is stored for a split second to allow it to be processed. Then there is working memory, or short-term memory. This is a component of the information processing system in which current conscious mental activity occurs. And there is long-term memory. This is the component of the information processing system in which virtually limitless amounts of information can be stored indefinitely. Working memory improves steadily and significantly every year from the age 4 to 15. The capacity of long-term memory is virtually limitless by the end of middle childhood. Memory storage, how much information is deposited in the brain, expands over childhood. But more important is retrieval, how readily stored material can be brought into working memory. As the prefrontal cortex matures, children are better able to use strategies to help them remember. Retrieval becomes more efficient and accurate. An extensive knowledge base makes it easier to master new, related information. A knowledge base is a body of knowledge in a particular area that makes it easier to master new information in that area. Knowledge base influences include experience, current opportunity, and personal motivation. Continuing on with information processing, control processes, or neurological mechanisms, require the brain to organize, prioritize, and direct mental operations. They are often called executive processes. This is the ability to use these is called executive function, and it improves with age and experience. All right, and focus on executive function. It's a term you should know as metacognition. This is thinking about thinking. It involves the ability to evaluate a cognitive task to determine how best to accomplish it, and then to monitor and adjust one's performance on that task. It improves with age and experience. There's also meta-memory, and this is simply knowing about memory. All right, now we're going to focus on language. In terms of vocabulary, by age 6, children know most of the basic vocabulary and grammar of their first language, and they may speak a second or even a third language. In middle childhood, words become pivotal for curriculum understanding. Continuing with language, understanding metaphors. School-aged children comprehend and enjoy puns, unexpected answers to normal questions, and metaphors because their new cognitive flexibility and social awareness make them funny. Metaphors are context-specific and build on knowledge base. Lack of metaphorical understanding, even if a child has a large vocabulary, signifies cognitive problems. Metaphors are context-specific, building on the knowledge base, and because school-aged children can create metaphors and similes, asking them to do so reveals emotions they do not express in other ways. All right, learning in school. Context. Adjusting vocabulary to the context. Pragmatics is the ability to use words and devices to communicate in various contexts. It allows children to change formal and informal codes to fit the audience. All children need instruction to become fluent in the formal code because the logic of grammar, whether who or whom is correct and how to spell you, is almost impossible to deduce. The peer group teaches the informal code, and each local community transmits dialect, metaphors, and pronunciation. All right, speaking in two languages. Code changes are obvious when children speak one language at home and another at school. Almost 1 out of 4 U.S. school-aged children have home languages other than English. 1 in 20 speak a regional dialect. All these alternate codes have distinct patterns of timing, grammar, and emphasis, as well as vocabulary, so all require much more than literal translation. Every nation includes children who speak one or more of the world's 6,000 languages. Continuing with speaking two languages, code switching correlates with school achievement. No brain differences occur if two languages learned in first 3 years. More children in the United States are now bilingual, and more of them speak English well, from about 40% to 82% in 2011. All right, teaching approaches. Language learning depends on the child, the home environment in terms of literacy, and the teacher's warmth, training, and skill. English language learners, or ELLs, use immersion, and first language instruction leads to new language instruction. Bilingual education is the instruction of two languages. English as a second language is called an ESL. There's an intense instruction with non-English speakers together with no use of a first language. There are differences in language learning. Common mistakes in detecting language learning difficulties occur. Assuming non-school language children are learning disabled. Concluding cause of every bilingual child's learning problem is solely language-based. Social factors and a language gap. There's socioeconomic status. Low SES families have smaller vocabularies, simpler vocabularies, and shorter sentences. There are correlations. Hippocampus development, for example, inadequate prenatal care, no breakfast, lead, crowded housing, or neighborhood violence can lead to inhibition of hippocampus development. And beyond correlations, there's also the home language, mother's education, and books. Expectations are adult positive expectations are related to achievement, shared parent-teacher expectations, and teachers' attitudes. Happiness or high grades, which contributes more to optimal development from middle childhood through late adulthood. Grit, persistence, and effort, or parental encouragement. Many scientists agree that crucial executive control processes develop during middle childhood. When parents support and encourage their child's learning, almost always the child masters the basic elementary school skills and almost never become crushed by life experiences. Specifically, parental encouragement affects child achievement. All right, and teaching and learning. International schooling. Cultures differ in what is valued, but there are some age-based goals. Educational practices differ between and within nations, and variation is greater in hidden curriculum. More than 95% of the world's 7-year-olds are in school. That is where their parents and political leaders want them to be. Hidden curriculum is the unofficial, unstated, or implicit rules and priorities that influence the academic curriculum and every other aspect of learning in a school and includes course selection, teacher characteristics, schedules and tracking, sports, competition, extracurricular activities, and the physical setting. Same situation, far apart. Spot the hidden curriculum. Literacy is central to the curriculum for school children everywhere, no matter how far apart they live. However, in the U.S. classroom, on the left, boys and girls learn together. Clothes are casual, history books are paperback and illustrated, and children of every background read the same stories with the same patriotic but not religious themes. The hidden curriculum is quite different for the boy on the right memorizing his holy book. All right, continue with learning in school. The international setting. Over the past 2 decades, More than 50 nations have participated in at least one massive international test of educational achievement. Longitudinal data reveals that when achievement rises, the national economy advances with it. This sequence seems causal, not merely correlational. Apparently, better educated adults become more productive workers. There are international achievement test scores. Progress in International Reading Literacy Study, this is PIRLS. In this literacy study, inaugurated in 2001, a planned 5-year cycle of international trend studies in the reading ability of fourth graders, and they found gender differences. And trends in math and science study, the TIMSS, international assessment of the math and science skills of 4th and 8th graders. Higher achievement related to teacher education, autonomy within the classroom, and buildings designed to foster collaboration. This is all from a Finnish study. They found gender differences as well. Although the TIMSS is very useful, different countries' scoring are not always comparable because of sample selection. Test administration and content validity are hard to keep uniform. All right, I just referenced the Finnish study, that is in terms of Finland. In an elementary school there, students do not score much better or worse than their United States peers on the TIMSS or the PIRLS. But educators in Finland do not believe that tests in childhood are the best measure of learning. Instead, they prefer to focus on using knowledge later on as measured by a test called the PISA. Shown here are PISA scores for 15-year-olds. Finland is among the highest scoring nations, and the United States is middling, just slightly below the overall average. As many nations are below the United States as they are above. For comparison, this graph also shows the highest, Singapore, and lowest, Dominican Republic. What do these rankings reveal? National and cultural contexts affect test scores. U.S. ranking has risen over the past 2 decades, but in 2015 there were 19 nations whose 4th graders surpassed the U.S. students. Most developing nations do not give these tests, but when they do, their scores are low. Finland's educational reforms resulted in dramatic ranking increases since 2011. Finland's reforms included changes over several years. There was the abolishment of ability grouping, curriculum reform to encourage collaboration and active learning. There's strict teacher requirements, the top 3% admitted to Teachers College. There's a 5-year program at no charge, a master's degree in theory and practice of education. There's more classroom autonomy for teachers. There is more time and encouragement to work with colleagues. Buildings are designed to foster collaboration and reflect the hidden curriculum regarding teacher professionalism. There's a strong teachers union. An assumption that every child has strengths and weaknesses that a teacher uses to foster learning. Almost no child designated for special education. All right, as I mentioned, there were gender differences found in school performance for these tests. On the PIRLS, the girls were ahead of the boys in verbal skills in every nation, and boys were ahead of the girls in math and science. On the TIMSS, the gender differences in math narrowed or disappeared in the gender similarities hypothesis. In the classroom, girls have higher grades overall, and grades dip at puberty. Reasons for the differences: social context of elementary school classroom and social prejudice and hidden curriculum favor young girls but not young women. And a word on ethnic diversity. As of 2014 in the United States, the nation's public schools have become majority-minority. Majority-minority means that most students are from groups that once were called minorities. In middle childhood, every child develops cognitively with specifics dependent far more on individual, particular experiences than on ethnic background. Children are ready to learn whatever their social context teaches them. Barring severe impairment, all school-age children can learn a second language, become skilled in math, reading, and writing if taught logically, step by step. Affected by SES, expectations and school practices and national policies, positively influenced by personal contract, school, and home. And now we'll focus on schooling in the United States. There's been an improvement in academic performance over the past decades. Gaps between income and ethnic groups from pre-kindergarten to high school exist, and U.S. schools are more segregated than 4 decades ago. There's national standards. The National Assessment of Education Program, or NAEP, is an ongoing and national representative measure of U.S. children's achievement in reading, mathematics, and other subjects over time. It is nicknamed the nation's report card. There's also the Common Core of Standards, developed in 2010. These are standards more rigorous than most state standards, are quite explicit, with half a dozen or more specific expectations for achievement in each subject for each grade, adopted by 44 states in 2013. Which one is best? A child's achievement is influenced more by income and ethnicity, with widening gap. There are choices and complications. In terms of the Common Core, it is initially favored, and opposition as testing increased and implementation began. And there are the Education Next findings. There is teacher opposition to the Common Core, 12% in 2013, and has grown to 40% in 2014. And with that concludes the lecture for Chapter 12.